don't even care if other people are watching this. I just want something to look back on because I think this is a really great conversation to have, and I want it. I want it
Capsulated.
Yes, so that I can watch it when I forget this.
Yeah. Hopefully you'll know that it's this one.
I'll mark it. We finally figure out the secrets of the universe.
Yeah.
No, okay, so what do you think of when you, sorry, we're talking about handstands, and what were you saying about like what you think of when you talk about getting your handstand?
So when I say that, what I'm shooting for, hoping for, planning for, is to be able to do it freestanding, which is more of a courage thing than like it's a place in my mind.
Yeah.
Not so much, right? So I want to feel like I have enough confidence to do it away from a wall, and have the like knowledge that I'll be able to roll with whatever happens wrong. I think that's as much as I can hope for, because everything else is like unrealistic. Like, oh, I want to be able to hold it for 25 seconds every time. Like, that's not going to happen. It's not. It'll get more accessible to do that, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that that's a less productive goal somehow. Because I don't want the kind of handstand that I like can hold for 10 seconds and I'm like 9, 8, 7. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want that level of tension.
Yeah, that amount of pressure.
Yeah, so I almost don't care how long I can hold it or anything like that. It's more like the psychological ease to feel like I'm just playing, because I feel really far away from that if I'm not at a wall. Like there was a brief handstand moment in the class that I took yesterday, and I was in the middle of the backyard.
Yeah.
And I was like, I kept doing these really lame handstand hops because I had no desire to get anywhere close to upright. It was like more if I flipped over.
Okay, so what you part of what you want to cultivate like a garden, is like peace of mind, is confidence. Like I heard confidence in there.
Yeah, because right now I feel afraid of falling.
Yeah,
and obviously you're gonna fall. So you have to have like a. And several people have told me this, and I'm not entirely sure, and I've been thinking about it today as well, how to learn how to fall, right? So some people are like, you just need to like tuck your head and somersault out of it.
Yeah.
But the couple of times I've even somersaulted, like I just went back and, is that what it's called? Somersault?
Do you mean, it's like a tuck and roll. No, it's not a summer. What is it? It's like forward roll. That's what you mean, right?
Just the one that like babies do.
Yeah, what the hell?
You put your head down and just go.
I know what you mean. I can think of all the fancy things. I'm like, Aikido roll. What's
whatever that is.
I know what you mean.
That thing that like the first thing baby gymnasts do.
Yeah.
But trying it, like it was a little like, whew.
Right. So like what happens what goes on when you're doing that? Goes whew.
It's not physically easy. My body does not respond like I'm a baby gymnast, because I'm not.
Yeah.
So falling or even somersaulting deliberately. So I haven't gotten to the place where I've like gone up into a handstand deliberately hoping to somersault out of it, because it's just a long way to go. I'm only 5 feet, but still that 5 feet feels like a really long way to go. Over backwards. Also, like doing that requires you to like tuck your chin, and then like there's a world in which you can hurt your neck. I'm scared of that. Like if I'm too stiff in my neck, as opposed to just like totally going with it, then I will hurt my neck.
Okay. So you're just really afraid.
Yes.
And I can see how that would like prevent you from, like it would make you stiff. You know how like the reason that cats can fall on their feet is they're kind of relaxed about it.
I didn't know that about cats, but kind of.
They're very limber, right? And it's because like, yeah, they know not to like buckle when they fall.
Yeah.
That's actually how you get hurt.
Right. And the other thing I was thinking is that in theory I could go into a bridge because it's something I'm physically capable of, but I don't know if I will have the presence of mind to like calmly know that I can fall into a bridge, and I've never done it. So part of me was thinking like, I wonder if it would be worth it to get you to spot me or something and just go from upright to bridge to like demonstrate physically to myself that like I just have to keep staying in my arms as opposed to like collapsing here. And if I do keep pushing through my arms, then I should end up in a bridge. Other people like cartwheel out of it. Some people like move their hand when they're going off balance. There's just all these things that I don't have. You know how you have to drive, like you learn how to drive and it takes a while for the brake to be your instinct.
Yeah.
Like something happens and you immediately, without thinking of it, go to the brake.
Yeah.
It takes a while so it's almost like
I was definitely someone who was like, which pedal do I use? Which is a bad situation.
As a new driver or like?
Yeah, as a new driver, I think I did that a few times where like I would know I had to like push a pedal, but in that instant I would forget which was which.
I think that for new drivers that's like not a uncommon thing probably.
Yeah.
Because you don't have such a strong muscular memory of like what it is. In the same way, I feel like I've never picked a way to come out of handstand that has worked for me. I don't feel comfortable with the somersault. I don't feel comfortable with the cartwheel. I don't feel comfortable going into a bridge. Like none of the options that I've come across are things that I'm like, great, cool. So that's the one that I'm gonna.
Yes. No matter what happens, you're okay.
Right.
You're really free to like practice and try it out because you know what to do.
Yeah.
And with the absence of that, and then like also, it sounds like you're like not only like afraid of hurting yourself, you're like afraid of your mental processes.
I'm afraid of my fear.
Yeah, you're afraid of your fear because like you can't trust yourself to think correctly upside down.
Yes. And I think that that's actually a well-founded fear.
Yeah.
Among all of my like neuroses and anxieties. Like I've seen myself be like, and I'm going down. Just like, no one's home. And I'm like, yeah. So.
For some reason, I just thought like it's good thing you're not a circus performer. Like a Cirque du Soleil. Like on a tightrope or something, and we're falling. Okay. So you need a way to fall safely.
Yeah. And
like
come across all of the ones.
A baby learns how to walk because like mom is there. She's gonna catch. She's gonna catch it. Has there ever been are you good with a spotter?
I don't know that I've had a ton of.
Yeah. I'm trying to think like of all the classes that you've taken, has there ever been a method that was really good for you? You're like, oh,
there are several things that work. Those are like the aha moments.
Yeah.
There are several things that I'm like, oh, this is good.
Yeah.
But none of them are like none of them are a key to being able to continually access it over and over again. It's like I lose the door. If there is even a door.
Yeah, because the way I see it is like you find something that is stabilizing. You're like, okay, I wasn't as afraid of doing that. Like, this is like safety, you know?
No. What do you mean?
Well, you were like talking yesterday about feeling safe and how it's only like when you really like create that nurtured, safe space that then you can do something.
Yeah.
So it's finding something that makes you feel safe going up into a handstand and then gradually extending the barriers around whatever the thing is.
Yeah. I mean, what's interesting is that I can do a handstand pretty far from the wall, but as long as it's in like...
As long as the wall is there.
As long as it's there.
Yeah. So I'm like, yeah, I wonder if a spotter would be good.
Yeah.
Because then like the person, me, at the Zoom, can gradually step more and more away.
Yeah.
But can also run in if you need something.
I think that, like, I would feel with a spotter like I felt with a wall, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I think you just need to learn to trust yourself. Ultimately. I don't know.
Ain't that the truth? Yeah.
And I do think also, like, identifying the things that help, identifying those aha moments, and like
Like cat spine helps.
Yeah.
Making sure my butt's in as opposed to like out, that helps. This thing today helps.
Yeah. And then we can taking pictures of it's good, taking videos. I think that's really smart.
Yeah.
Okay. We can try tomorrow.
Yeah.
Spotting. Yeah.
I mean, I've got sides, but
well, there's lots to do tomorrow.
Oh, tomorrow's jam-packed. Action-packed.
Wednesday, hump day.
Where were we?
Hmm? Oh, the book!
Where were we? This is not the book.
Are you already getting to the book?
Well, now I'm like self-conscious because of us taking longer.
I thought we would have 40 more minutes of discussion.
Just yapping about unrelated subjects.
But we are committed to finishing book 5.
It's 100% going to happen. There's no doubt.
I'm starting to get very... I know we have so much to go, but I'm starting to be like, no, what will we do once this is over? Just do a different book. There's 10 more books to go. And we'll just do a different book. We'll do a different book. That's just it. You know what's really silly? So I do have a very nice camera in my room. And I've thought about that, but then we can't live stream, right?
You're asking me?
Anyway, I've just considered this of like, we're doing a very, very low tech operation here.
Yeah.
And I perhaps have the means to make it a little nicer, and I'm not doing so.
Why not?
Just I worried about the setup, and then I have to upload it. But it wouldn't be live. Is there a way to make it live?
There probably is. There probably is. Everything is just chords.
Like, the really nice thing about this was you put forth this idea, and then it was just like, okay. And I figured out the easiest way to do it, and we just did it.
Mm-hmm.
So there was very little thinking about it.
Mm-hmm.
And whenever you like start to plan, it can,
you get in the worry brain.
Yeah, you put more and more obstacles. Because then you have to upload to your computer, and then I'd probably be like, oh, well, now it's like really nice looking, so now I should edit it. And you do it, and it becomes a whole thing.
Okay.
Eventually. We went down a bit of a YouTube spiral yesterday.
I went down one too, but I bet you it wasn't the same one.
Well, no, it was just literally on creating a YouTube channel.
Woo! Mine wasn't so
and I was
productive.
like, maybe this is what I should do from now on.
Maybe. Like, I don't know. I don't know that it isn't.
I was like, sure, I'll just have a YouTube channel. And they said, like, I don't know, I was watching this girl, like, how to get YouTube followers into all these, like, tips on how to create a channel. And number one is always be consistent, which, hey, we're being very consistent.
We are being extraordinarily consistent.
That's good.
It's extraordinary for us. Not so much.
But then another suggestion was you should always have at least 50 to 100 ideas in your arsenal for things to make a video on.
What?
Yeah, which is a lot. And then I started writing down.
You were like, do I have 50?
Yeah, I was like, do I have 50? And yeah, I came up with like 63, I think. So, I mean, a lot of them, yeah, I mean, there's always stuff to talk about.
It doesn't matter, it's just ideas, yeah.
They're just ideas, and some of them are like, makeover.
Right.
Like, try on makeup, or whatever it is. But that's totally legitimate as a YouTube video.
Totally. That's a pretty good YouTube channel to fall through.
Yeah. What channel did you fall through?
Skincare. It's like, how am I still looking at stuff? Like, is there stuff to still be looked at?
There's always stuff.
Yeah. I put like a bunch of things on my Amazon, like, dedicated list.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, this is it. Like, I went on a whole thing about the under eye things, which I've never bothered to look into before. Very difficult to find any vegan ones because almost all of them have snail or pearls or
Rolls. Oh, that's messy.
it's an animal byproduct.
I did not think of that. They live on the stones.
Whoa. The crystallized
Wow.
mucus.
I've used pearl masks before.
Of course you have.
Yeah, I didn't think that.
Yeah, but you have like a different
Ethics.
situation going on.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, what is it? It's always snail or pearl or anyway. So marine collagen, whatever that is. So there's very few like options. Anyway, so I went on. That was one of the things that I went on. Then I'm pretty sure the purple orchid. I was all about the dark purples last night. That's what it was.
I tried. Did you get things?
No, I didn't buy anything because I have a little bit of
I
respect.
have some samples for it. I think a little pouch full of lots of Innisfree.
What have you been doing?
What are we even doing here?
I gotta go. Put some shit on my eyes.
I heard really good things about that eye cream, and then I tried it, and I think because it's scented, it just took it.
Literally.
You know when have you had this, especially on your eyes? And some people's eye skin is more sensitive than others.
Mm-hmm.
I think black people.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of feel it's like it just doesn't feel right.
I don't know that I've
Kind
done
of
enough things to
stings.
my eyes to
It
like.
stings, and it's why,
Okay.
especially around the eyes, anything that's perfumed is a bad idea.
I see. Yeah. Is this the orchid one? Because there's that purple orchid one is enough. I don't
I
know.
think
that.
there's a green tea one that I have not tried. I'm sure. Sure.
Yes, I'm sure there are lots. I also,
Innisfree.
you don't know.
Yeah.
I also really want to do the. I went down a Purito hole, and they have an essence there. I'll show you. It's like right here. Probably this. We shouldn't do it. Okay, so one of them is the Sika sleeping pack. That I'm interested in. Where is it? Oh, I think it's in my cart. Not even in my list. I'm like, let's just go. It's go time. This one.
Galactomycin. Galactomites. I don't think I've
Ever seen it?
experimented with galactomites yet.
I don't know what that is.
Oh, your mama, tell her we're live streaming.
What did she say?
It says, are you going to read today?
Here, Mama.
Galactomyces.
Somebody wants to know something about your singing. Are we still on your channel?
No, we're not, I promise.
Maybe we had people who come here from it. Yes, I'm really curious about this.
I don't know what this is.
Patera essence this has also. Which is the thing that SK2 has.
Impossible.
Je sais pas.
I mean, bakery, but they're ingredients. No, it's just a formulation. It's like a secret recipe.
The SK2 thing? Yeah, but they say Patera. I don't know, but maybe it's a everything.
I just know the story about it. I forgot the industry. There was this thing that was making all their workers' hands really soft.
Oh, this story. I feel like that shit is not.
And then they're like, what is this magical essence? And I started
No, that's sweet.
overnight.
Just overnight.
Night results.
Yeah, we are right now doing it. My mom must not be a subscriber because she would have gotten a notification.
Your mom is managing this. Like,
I don't know if she's knows that.
oh, you can tell her? No, I feel
she
like accepted my invitation.
She did?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we haven't talked about it, so maybe she's just going to go visit. Okay. So, what? I'm just thinking about what.
I just wanted to say there are some YouTube channels out there that are really, really funny.
Really?
Really funny. And you can literally have a channel on anything. And people will use it and look it up because I know that because I've been using those channels to figure out how to do certain things. Like I was looking at how to, if it's possible to and anyway, there's just like anything you want to look up is really on YouTube, and sometimes it's like some like not that there's anything wrong with being 55, but it's like some like nerd who's like, I'm going to show you how to do this, and like zero charisma, I don't know, bad branding, and people are watching because people just want to know how to do it.
So as long as you're doing something necessary,
I don't know, as long as you can like search it in to a browser, people click on it.
cool.
It makes me think that one day there will be no written instructions.
I see that.
We're on book 5, chapter 15.
Yeah. I don't remember anything that was happening.
What happened last night? Oh yeah, Pierre and Andrew.
Yeah. Reunited.
Yeah, who knew they had such a deep love?
They certainly didn't.
I don't think we saw them together very much at all. But apparently, Pierre knows his family.
I think Andrew might have been the one whose house it was that Dolokhov party happened.
Wait, Andrews? No. No, because
There goes
I don't know who that person was, but I remember when you found the person.
I know, but you thought it was some like person came and went. Like
It wasn't because
I don't have like a thought out thing about this, so
I think it was like they were at some party and then they went back to Andrews and they had dinner. And that made me very confused because I'm like, when is this party at? People eat late. And then they had dinner and Andrew was like, never get married, Pierre. Ever, ever. And then Pierre was staying in this house with Dolokhov, and they were getting up to all kinds of nonsense. And Andrew was like, "Promise me you will not drink tonight, or go back to that house." And Pierre was like, "Yeah, of course, I definitely will not." And then he got a text message, or whatever the equivalent was. How did he find out about it?
I don't know. You guys still up?
I literally like pictured it. I think I literally pictured in my head. He got like a text like, "Yo, rager going on at the D house," and then he's like, "Cool, I'll hop in an Uber," and then he went over there.
I mean, the Uber part might be true. Weird. Yeah. Well, I don't think.
But I think that's the only time we really saw Pierre and Andrew together before now.
But
it seems like they can confide in one another. They can unload their heavy burden with one another.
Their burden?
Yeah, because like that time too, Prince Andrew was like,
only Andrew has a burden.
Talk about my life.
Yeah, only Andrew has a burden.
Yeah, always.
Because Pierre this time was like wanting to talk about his beautiful worldview.
It's beautiful.
Fantastic it is. He's like, but God.
This felt very Russian to me.
You did?
Yeah, it felt like Tolstoy just wants to like extol about philosophy for a while and use these two characters to illustrate both points.
It was very effective, I thought. I don't know.
I
I like, there's times when I'm reading that I'm like, oh, I can hear from my voice that I like am genuinely interested in. Isn't that weird?
Yeah.
It's very,
Yeah.
Like I suddenly get caught in my own earnestness and I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa.
Yeah, that was definitely happening last night.
See, you know!
No, but that was all happening last night. We were very earnest last night.
And then it's so hard.
It was good.
Everything's really hard.
I liked it. Hopefully, I want to be this all the time. Yourself. Yeah. You know, argued, is there good? Is there God?
Is God good?
Right. What happens after we die? Prince Andrew
is scared of the void.
It's very scary. And then they went back to Andrew's house.
And ate?
I mean, kind of. No, they went back to like Bald Hills, right? Yeah, I'm keeping track of what these places are called.
Cool. Well, that one is.
I mean, the other one is like
prominent.
Boguduro Chavo. He's living out this Thoreau existence in the woods. That's
why is he doing that away from his son? Is the question.
Because he has to take care of himself. Oh, cute.
But what about his son? I guess I just think it's weird that his son doesn't live with him. And I don't really know how to understand that.
I just don't think. It's like the father should have nothing to do with how his child is. I don't think that's.
But then, like, why does he care if the kid has fever? I don't know. I'm being very binary about this. Either he loves him or he doesn't.
To me, like, there was a lot revealed with the fact that, you know, when he had fever and he was giving instruction of what should happen with the child, but not administering it. Like, that to me is how
he went over to the kid and he was like, give him the medicine.
I know, and then had his sister wake up the kid and give it to him.
Yeah, that was really good. Because she was like, don't do it. He was like, I'm doing it. She was like, don't do it. He was like, I'm doing it right now. And then at the end, he was like, I'm doing it. That's final. Now do it. Yeah, that was totally strange.
Yeah. So I think in the way that, you know how it's like Pierre gives his orders, like, do all these things all over my lands. I think that's how they thought parenting was. Like, you're not the person caring for the child. You're just the one deciding how the child is cared for.
I could be that kind of parent.
Yeah, let's get into that.
Mm-hmm. I could be like, educate them.
Great.
Which one did I say again today? It's good.
There goes those brain cells.
No!
I guess he's not going to be an engineer.
No! Well, I mean, I
Well,
don't care if he is or isn't, but he seems to like it.
Yeah. It's true.
It's like he knows what a drill is, but he doesn't.
Wait, he's never seen a drill?
No.
What did he? Really?
No, he thinks a lot
Or
of
he
things
thought
make
they were
me...
buttons.
He thinks a lot of... He narrates that a lot of things make noises that don't make, and it's usually quite intense, the noise. So he's like, the ball came, and he's like... And we're like, but it didn't.
Don't you wish that when you got older, you could go to him and say, like, hey,
What
did
did
you
you
want?
mean?
What were you trying to tell
Yes.
us?
You know what I'm so upset about? He stopped saying that word that I wanted to know what it was. A peed. Remember?
Yeah.
Never gonna know what a peed is because he picked up something and I was like, what is that, a peed? And he was like,
That's not a
he
word.
was like, it's fluff. And I was like, shit.
Oh.
But it's a peed too, right? And he just ignored me.
Have you asked him? Hey,
Like that's the closest, like he's 2.
now he knows.
Because if I were like, what's a peed? He'd just be like, a peed. If he knew what, like, how would he, like, I don't know. I don't think he's able to, like, describe, like, he says big everything. He's really into big, like, he's like, a big truck. Bigger.
Yeah. Apparently, there's waves, and parents are mostly functioning in delta waves, which is the same that our brains produce in deep sleep.
My dad had a really funny dream. Okay.
Oh, okay. Anyway, I just think that's like fascinating that babies are
That's really
basically
interesting.
asleep.
That's really interesting.
So things are very like non-linear.
That's really cool.
That's why also they can just like fall asleep. Maybe like sleeping and being awake is not that different. What's your dream?
It's not my dream. My dad's dream. It's hilarious. It's like I dreamt I was starring in a Korean movie. I don't know if I should tell the whole future of this. There were a lot of like descriptions about like the people involved and like where he was housed, and he was like really excited and we were all there. And then he got his like schedule, and there were costume fitting, like he knew what he was wearing and everything. And then he realized he got the stuff like the like shots that they were going to do, and he realized that he forgot that things are shot out of order. So he had prepared the very beginning of the script because it's the beginning.
Yeah.
And actually, they were going to do something like way at the end first.
It's fascinating. Okay.
Yeah. And then he came to me and he was like, what do I do? I don't know any of my lines. And apparently I was like, oh, why don't you just talk to them and tell them, like, can you please shoot whatever I have prepared? And he was like, oh, okay. And then he went and he said that to them, and he said they all seemed disappointed, but they're like, okay, but it's kind of going to screw up our whole production schedule. Because we obviously have this all, like, you know.
Yeah. He had an actor's nightmare. He's not even an actor.
He is, though.
He is.
He's done plays and stuff.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, oh my god, it's so classic that he doesn't know his lines.
Yeah, no, yeah. Classic anxiety dream, classic active dream.
I had a dream the other night, which, whatever, I just wanted to share, and then we'll read, okay? But I thought it was so funny. Because, like, first of all, it was a happy dream, which is really a big deal for me, because often I just have weird, disturbing, messed up dreams. And they're not nightmares. I just, like, I'm like, that was kind of messed up. But this one I like woke up really happy, and I got cast in a TV show playing a cat. Like playing a cat. It was a cat person. And I was like, oh my god, this is amazing. Like, and the dream like went through like the whole testing process. And I was like,
did you have lines?
Definitely. It was like a full on like it was kind of like action oriented. So I was gonna have to be doing like action cat moves and things like that. And afterwards I was like, I don't know why. I guess I just like channeled catness. And then I met someone else who got cast in the show. I guess like we started shooting. And she was literally a cat. She was literally a black cat, like with a cat face. And she had got cast as a different animal.
What was she cast as? What do you mean? Did she walk on all legs, or she was just she was standing, but
she was standing with cat face, black cat face, not like that.
What was she cast as?
I think she was like a rabbit or something.
Were you like?
I was like, oh, that's. I thought of it like, oh, why didn't you get the cat part? But she's like, yeah, it wasn't right for me.
That wasn't right for me. That's really good. Oh my god, that's really good. Sometimes. That's so good.
Okay. Okay. Now I'm ready.
Now you are?
Now I'm ready to read.
Okay.
I don't know what I'm going to cover next. Throw me some suggestions, but I don't want to do anything from Far Cry. Just answering that.
Yes. I don't know.
Book 5, Chapter 15. When returning from his leave, Rostov felt for the first time how close was the bond that united him to Denisov and the whole regiment.
On approaching it, Rostov felt as he had done when approaching his home in Moscow. When he saw the first Hussar with the unbuttoned uniform of his regiment, when he recognized redhead Dementiev. It sounds like a...
Is it Dementor?
Yeah, it sounds like a Russian supervillain. Dementiev. And saw the picket ropes of the roan horses when Lavrushka gleefully shouted to his master, "The Count has come!" And Denisov, who had been asleep on his bed, ran all disheveled out of the mud hut to embrace him, and the officers collected round to greet the new arrival. Rostov experienced the same feeling as when his mother, his father, and his sister had embraced him, and tears of joy choked him so that he could not speak. The regiment was also a home, and as unalterably dear and precious as his parents' house. Cool.
When he had reported himself to the commander of the regiment and had been reassigned to his former squadron, had been on duty and had gone out foraging, when he had again entered into all the little interests of the regiment and felt himself deprived of liberty and bound in one narrow, unchanging frame, he experienced the same sense of peace, of moral support, and the same sense of being at home here in his own place as he had felt under the parental roof. But here was none of all that turmoil of the world at large, where he did not know his right place and took mistaken decisions. Here was no Sonia with whom he ought or ought not to have an explanation. Here was no possibility of going there or not going there. Here there were not 24 hours in the day which could be spent in such a variety of ways. There was not that innumerable crowd of people of whom not one was nearer to him or farther from him than another. There were none of those uncertain and undefined money relations with his father, and nothing to recall that terrible loss to Dolokhov.
Except for Dolokhov.
Is he back there? Okay. Here in the
regiment,
regiment,
he was shot.
I mean, that's,
It seems unlikely that he would just.
that was a long time ago. He's fine now.
Is it?
I forget if. Here in the regiment, all was clear and simple. The whole world was divided into two unequal parts. One, our Pavlograd regiment, the other, all the rest. And the rest was no concern of his. In the regiment, everything was definite. Who was lieutenant, who captain, who was a good fellow, who a bad one, and most of all, who was a comrade. The canteen keeper gave one credit. One's pay came every 4 months. There was nothing to think out or decide. You had only to do nothing that was considered bad in the Pavlograd regiment, and when given an order, to do what was clearly, distinctly, and definitely ordered, and all would be well.
Having once more entered into the definite conditions of this regimental life, literally, Rostov felt the joy and relief a tired man feels on lying down to rest. Life in the regiment during this campaign. Into a different page, sorry. During this campaign was all the pleasanter for him because after his loss to Dolokhov, for which in spite of all his family's efforts to console him, he could not forgive himself, he had made up his mind to atone for his fault by serving, not as he had done before, but really well. And by being a perfectly first-rate comrade and officer. In a word, a splendid man altogether, a thing which seemed so difficult out in the world, but so possible.
His parents in 5 years. He received 10,000 rubles a year, but now resolved to take only 2,000 and leave the rest to repay the debt to his parents.
Our army, after repeated retreats and advances and battles at Pultusk and Preussisch Eylau, was concentrated near Bartenstein. It was awaiting the emperor's arrival and the beginning of a new campaign.
The Pavlograd regiment, belonging to the part of the army which had served in the 1805 campaign, had been recruiting up to strength in Russia and arrived too late to take part in the first actions of the campaign. It had been neither at Pultusk nor at Preussisch Eylau, and when it joined the army in the field in the second half of the campaign, was attached to Platov's division.
Platov's division was acting independently of the main army. Several times, parts of the Pavlograd regiment had exchanged shots with the enemy, had taken prisoners, and once had even captured Marshal Oudinot's carriages. In April, the Pavlograds were stationed immovably for some weeks near a totally ruined and deserted German village.
The thaw had set in. It was muddy and cold. The ice on the river broke, and the roads became impassable. For days, neither provisions for the men nor fodder for the horses had been issued. As no transports could arrive, the men dispersed about the abandoned and deserted villages, searching for potatoes, but found few even of these.
Everything had been eaten up, and the inhabitants had all fled. If any remained, they were worse than beggars, and nothing more could be taken from them. Even the soldiers, usually pitiless enough, instead of taking anything from them, often gave them the last of their rations.
The Pavlograd regiment had had only 2 men wounded in action, but had lost nearly half its men from hunger and sickness. In the hospitals, death was so certain that soldiers suffering from fever or the swelling that came from bad food preferred to remain on duty, and hardly able to drag their legs went to the front rather than to the hospitals. When spring came on, the soldiers found a plant just showing out of the ground that looked like asparagus, which for some reason they called Mashka's sweet root. It was very bitter, but they wandered about the field seeking it and dug it out with their sabers and ate it. though they were ordered not to do so, as it was a noxious plant. That spring, a new disease broke out among the soldiers, swelling of the arms, legs, and face, which the doctors attributed to eating this root. But in spite of all this, the soldiers of Denisov's squadron fed chiefly on Mashka's sweet root, because it was the second week that the last of the biscuits were being doled out at the rate of half a pound a man, and the last potatoes received had sprouted and frozen.
The horses also had been fed for a fortnight on straw from the thatched roofs and had become terribly thin, though still covered with tufts of felty winter hair.
Despite this destitution, the soldiers and officers went on living just as usual. Despite their pale, swollen faces and tattered uniforms, the hussars formed line for roll call, kept things in order, groomed their horses, polished their arms, brought in straw from the thatched roof in place of fodder, and sat down to dine round the cauldrons from which they rose up hungry, joking about their nasty food and their hunger. As usual, in their spare time, they lit bonfires, steamed themselves before them naked, smoked, picked out and baked, sprouting rotten potatoes, told and listened to stories of Potemkin's and Suvorov's campaigns, or to legends of Elisha the Sly, or the priest-laborer Milkolka.
The officers, as usual, lived in twos and threes in the roofless, half-ruined houses. The seniors tried to collect straw and potatoes and, in general, food for the men. The younger ones occupied themselves as before, some playing cards. There was plenty of money, though there was no food. Some with more innocent games, such as quoits and skittles. The general trend of the campaign was rarely spoken of, partly because nothing certain was known about it, partly because there was a vague feeling that, in the main, it was going badly.
Rostov lived, as before, with Denisov, and since their furlough had become more friendly than ever. Denisov never spoke of Rostov's family, but by the tender friendship his commander showed him, Rostov felt that the elder Hussar's luckless love for Natasha played a part in strengthening their friendship.
Oh wow, just the complete opposite impact as the other one.
Stalagol.
Yeah.
Denisov evidently tried to expose Rostov to danger as seldom as possible, and after an action greeted his safe return with evident joy. On one of his foraging expeditions, in a deserted ruin of an old Pole and his daughter with an infant in arms. They were half-clad, hungry, too weak to get away on foot, and had no means of obtaining a conveyance. Rostov brought them to his quarters, placed them in his own lodging, and kept them for some weeks while the old man was recovering. One of his comrades, talking of women, began chaffing Rostov, saying that he was more wily than any of them, and that it would not be a bad thing if he introduced to them the pretty Polish girl he had saved. Rostov took the joke as an insult, flared up, and said such unpleasant things to the officer that it was all Denisov could do to prevent a duel.
Jesus.
When the officer had gone away, Denisov, who did not himself know what Rostov's relations with the Polish girl might be, began to upbraid him for his quickness of temper, and Rostov replied,
"Say what you like. She's like a sister to me, and I can't tell you how it offended me. Because, well, for that reason."
Denisov patted him on the shoulder and began rapidly pacing the room without looking at Rostov, as was his way at moments of deep feeling.
"Ah, what a mad breed you Rostovs are," he muttered, and Rostov noticed tears in his eyes. "Oh, I don't remember who played Denisov, and that's what I'm doing. Do you remember?"
I do not. I didn't think he was going to become so heavily featured.
Anyway, some guy named Thomas Arnold, apparently.
Is it?
There's no picture.
Oh. Okay.
Can you look elsewhere?
No, it's not. I thought it was just that.
No, weirdly, he's been in multiple things but doesn't have a picture. I don't think this is him. Oh, perhaps this.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't
Okay.
not.
Okay. Chapter 16. In April, the troops were enlivened by news of the Emperor's arrival, but Rostov had no chance of being present at the review he held at Bardenstein, as the Pavlograds were at the outposts far beyond that place.
They were bivouacking. Denisov and Rostov were living in an earth hut dug out for them by the soldiers and roofed with branches and turf. The hut was made in the following manner, which had then come into vogue. A trench was dug 3.5 feet wide, 4 feet 8 inches deep, and 8 feet long. At one end of the trench, steps were cut out, and these formed the entrance and vestibule. I have no ability to understand this type of shit.
Right.
The trench itself was the room, in which the lucky ones, such as the squadron commander, had a board lying on piles at the end opposite the entrance to serve as a table. On each side of the trench, the earth was cut out to a breadth of about 2.5 feet, and this did duty for bedsteads and couches. The roof was so constructed that one could stand up in the middle of the trench and could even sit up on the beds if one drew close to the table. Denisov, who was living luxuriously because the soldiers of his squadron liked him, had also a board in the roof at the farther end, with a piece of broken but mended glass in it for a window. Okay. When it was very cold, embers from the soldiers' campfire were placed on a bent sheet of iron on the steps of the reception room, as Denisov called that part of the hut, and it was then so warm that the officers, of whom there were always some with Denisov and Rostov, sat in their short sleeves.
So it sounds like literally they constructed beds out of just like digging into the dirt. Right?
It sounds like the whole room was dug into the dirt, but I don't know how that would then function, how glass would function as a window, then that's where I got lost.
I don't know if it's like, so his bed is at the end, and there's still like a tent, right? Like the roof is
They haven't mentioned the roof, but I'm guessing the roof was so constructed that one could stand up. That's all it says.
yeah. What did I write? So there's like literally a piece of glass. It's like propped up on this little dirt bed that looks like a window.
This is miserable.
Mm-hmm.
This and all the stuff about the potatoes.
The root.
The root.
In April, Rostov was in orderly duty. One morning, between 7 and 8, returning after a sleepless night, he sent for embers, changed his rain-soaked underclothes, said his prayers, drank tea, got warm, then tidied up the things on the table and in his own corner, and, his face glowing from exposure to the wind and with nothing on but his shirt, lay down on his back, putting his arms under his head. He was pleasantly considering the probability of being promoted in a few days for his last reconnoitering expedition, and was awaiting Denisov, who had gone out somewhere and with whom he wanted to talk.
Suddenly he heard Denisov shouting in a vibrating voice behind the hut, evidently much excited. Rostov moved to the window to see whom he was speaking to, and saw the quartermaster, Topchenko.
I ordered you not to let them eat that Mashka woot stuff, Denisov was shouting, and I saw with my own eyes how Lazarchuk brought some from the fields.
I have given the order again and again, Your Honor, but they don't obey, answered the quartermaster.
Rostov lay down again on his bed and thought complacently, let him fuss and bustle now. My job's done, and I'm lying down, capitally. He could hear that Lavrushka, that sly, bold orderly of Denisov's, was talking as well as the quartermaster. Lavrushka was saying something about loaded wagons, biscuits, and oxen he had seen when he had gone out for provisions.
Then Denisov's voice was heard shouting farther and farther away, "Saddle! Second platoon!"
Where are they off to now? Thought Rostov.
5 minutes later, Denisov came into the hut, climbed with muddy boots on his bed, which was warm, lit his pipe, furiously scattered his things about, took his leaded whip, buckled on his saber, and went out again. In answer to Rostov's inquiry where he was going, he answered vaguely and crossly that he had some business.
Let God and our great monarch judge me afterwards, said Denisov going out, and Rostov heard the hoofs of several horses splashing through the mud. He did not even trouble to find out where Denisov had gone. Having got warm in his corner, he fell asleep and did not leave the hut till toward evening. Denisov had not yet returned. The weather had cleared up, and near the next hut 2 officers and a cadet were playing spika, laughing as they threw their missiles, which buried themselves in the soft mud. Rostov joined them. In the middle of the game, the officers saw some wagons approaching with 15 hussars on their skinny horses behind them. The wagons, escorted by the hussars, drew up to the picket ropes, and a crowd of hussars surrounded them.
There now, Denisov has been worrying, said Rostov, and here are the provisions.
So they are, said the officers. Won't the soldiers be glad?
A little behind the hussars came Denisov, accompanied by 2 infantry officers with whom he was talking.
Rostov went to meet them.
I warn you, Captain, one of the officers, a short, thin man, evidently very angry, was saying.
Haven't I told you I won't give them up, replied Denisov.
You will answer for it, Captain. It is mutiny, seizing the transport of one's own army. Our men have had nothing to eat for 2 days.
And mine have had nothing for 2 weeks, said Denisov.
It is robbery. You'll answer for it, sir, said the infantry officer, raising his voice.
Now what are you pestering me for? Cried Denisov, suddenly losing his temper. I shall answer for it and not you, and you better not buzz about here till you get hurt. Be off! Go! He shouted at the officers.
Very well, then, shouted the little officer, undaunted and not riding away. If you are determined to rob, I'll...
Go to the devil! Quick march! While you're safe and sound! And Denisov turned his horse on the officer.
Very well, muttered the officer threateningly, and turning his horse, he trotted away, jolting in his saddle.
A dog astride a fence. A wheeled dog astride a fence, shouted Denisov after him. The most insulting expression a cavalryman can address to a mounted infantryman. Okay. And riding up to Rostov, he burst out laughing.
I've taken transports from the infantry by force, he said. After all, I can't let our men starve.
The wagons that had reached the hussars had been consigned to an infantry regiment. But learning from Lavrushka that the transport was unescorted, Denisov, with his hussars, had seized it by force. The soldiers had biscuits dealt out to them freely, and they even shared them with the other squadrons.
The next day, the regimental commander sent for Denisov, and holding his fingers spread out before his eyes, said,
This is how I look at this affair. I know nothing about it and won't begin proceedings, but I advise you to ride over to the staff and settle the business there in the commissariat department, and if possible, sign a receipt for such and such stores received. If not, as the demand was booked against an infantry regiment, there will be a row, and the affair may end badly.
A row. From the regimental commanders, Denisov decided to act on this advice. Back to his dugout, states such as Rostov had never yet seen him in. Denisov could not speak and gasped for breath. When Rostov asked what was the matter, he only uttered some incoherent oaths and threats in a hoarse, feeble voice.
Alarmed at Denisov's condition, Rostov suggested that he should undress, drink some water, and send for the doctor.
Twine me for wobbly. Oh, some more water? What? Let them twine me, but I'll always thwash scoundrels. And I'll tell the Emperor, ice, he muttered.
Well, because he comes back and they're like, oh, trying to tend to him.
Yeah. But he's like, ice.
Ice.
It's not cold enough in the winter in Russia.
Do you have ice?
Yeah, it's just like right here and there and there and there and there.
The regimental doctor, when he came, said it was absolutely necessary to bleed Denisov. Bleeding is so, it's literally, they just bleed them, right? So crazy. A deep saucer of black blood was taken from his hairy arm, and only then was he able to relate what had happened to him.
I get there, Dale, began Denisov.
I don't know why sometimes he can pronounce an R. Anyway.
And look at how many R's there are in this.
Right.
Now then, where's your chief's quarters? They were pointed out. Please to wait. I've ridden 20 miles and have duties to attend to and no time to wait. Announce me. Very well, so out comes their head chief, also took it into his head to lecture me. It's wobbly, I say. It's not done by a man who seizes provisions to feed his soldiers, but by him who takes them to fill his own pockets. Will you please be silent? Very good. Then he says, go and give a receipt to the commissioner, but your affair will be passed on to headquarters. I go to the commissioner. I enter, and at the table, who do you think? No, but wait a bit. Who is it that's starving us? Shouted Denisov, hitting the table with the fist of his newly bled arm so violently that the table nearly broke down and the tumblers on it jumped about. Tell your name. What? So it's you who's starving us to death, is it? Take this, and I hit him so fat, straight in his snout. Ah, what a, and I started flashing him.
I don't know.
Who is he beating the shit out of? Who's
Tellian and Tony.
Well, I've had a bit of fun, I can tell you, cried Denisov, gleeful and yet angry, his white teeth showing under his black mustache. I'd have killed him if they hadn't taken him away. Did you find it on?
Tellian, he's a small officer of the same squadron. Is Tellian the one who took the money?
I doubt it. Oh, man,
Maybe. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah?
Yeah, it is. Remember, and then Vostok gets the money and then cries. Tellian then just knew he had no father and mother.
Yeah.
That is Tellian.
Cool.
And then cries. Right? So he hit him. But it killed him if they hadn't taken him away. But what are you shouting for? Calm yourself, said Rostov. You set your arm bleeding afresh. Wait, we must tie it up again.
Denisov was bandaged up again and put to bed. Next day he woke calm and cheerful.
But at noon, the adjutant of the regiment came into Rostov's and Denisov's dugout with a grave and serious face, and regretfully showed them a paper addressed to Major Denisov from the regimental commander in which inquiries were made about yesterday's occurrence. The adjutant told them that the affair was likely to take a very bad turn, that a court-martial had been appointed, and in view of the severity with which marauding and insubordination were now regarded, degradation to the ranks would be the best that could be hoped for.
The case of parties was that after seizing Major Denisov being drunk, went to the chief quartermaster and without any provocation called him a thief, threatened to strike him, and on being let out, had rushed into the office and given 2 officials a thrashing and dislocated the arm of one of them.
In answer to Rostov's renewed questions, Denisov said, laughing, that he remembered that some other fellow had got mixed up in it, and that it was all nonsense and rubbish, and he did not in the least fear any kind of trial. And if those scoundrels dared attack him, he would give them an answer that they would not easily forget.
Denisov spoke contemptuously of the whole matter, but Rostov knew him too well not to detect that, while he hiding it from others, at heart he feared a court-martial and was worried over the affair, which was evidently taking a bad turn. Every day, letters of inquiry and notices from the court arrived, and on the 1st of May, Denisov was ordered to hand the squadron over to the next in seniority and appear before the staff of his division to explain his violence at the commissariat office. On the previous day, Platov reconnoitered with 2 Cossack regiments and 2 squadrons of hussars. Denisov, as was his wont, rode out in front of the outposts, parading his courage. A bullet fired by a French sharpshooter hit him in the fleshy part of his leg. Perhaps at another time, Denisov would not have left the regiment for so slight a wound, but now he took advantage of it to excuse himself from appearing at the staff and went into hospital. Okay.
All right. What's going on at the war? Chapter 17. In June, the Battle of Friedland was fought, in which the Pavlograds did not take part, and after that an armistice was proclaimed. Rostov, who felt his friend's absence very much, having no news of him since he left, and feeling very anxious about his wound and the progress of his affairs, took advantage of the armistice to get leave to visit Denisov in hospital.
The hospital was in a small Prussian town that had been twice devastated by Russian and French troops. Because it was summer, when it was so beautiful out in the fields, the little town presented a particularly dismal appearance with its broken roofs and fences, its foul streets, tattered inhabitants, and the sick and drunken soldiers wandering about.
The hospital was in a brick building with some of the window frames and panes broken, in a courtyard surrounded by the remains of a wooden fence that had been pulled to pieces. Several bandaged soldiers with pale, swollen faces were sitting or walking about in the sunshine in the yard.
Directly Rostov entered the door. Never heard that. He was enveloped by a smell of putrefaction and hospital air. On the stairs, he met a Russian army doctor smoking a cigar. The doctor was followed by a Russian assistant.
I can't tear myself to pieces, the doctor was saying. Come to Makar Alexeyevich in the evening. I shall be there.
The assistant asked some further questions.
Do the best you can. Isn't it all the same? The doctor noticed Rostov coming upstairs.
What do you want, sir? Said the doctor. What do you want? The bullets having spared you, do you want to try typhus? This is a pest house, sir.
How so? Asked Rostov.
Typhus, sir. It's death to go in. Only we two, Makiv and I, he pointed to the assistant. Keep on here. Some 5 of us doctors have died in this place. When a new one comes, he is done for in a week, said the doctor with evident satisfaction. Russian doctors have been invited here, but our allies don't like it at all.
Rostov explained that he wanted to see Major Denisov of the Hussars. It was wounded.
I don't know. I can't tell you, sir. Only think. I am alone in charge of 3 hospitals with more than 400 patients. It's well that the charitable Prussian ladies send us 2 pounds of coffee and some lint each month, or we should be lost, he laughed. 400, sir, and they're always sending me fresh ones. There are 400, eh? He asked, turning to his assistant.
The assistant looked fagged out. He was evidently vexed and impatient for the talkative doctor to go.
Major Denisov, Rostov said again. He was wounded at Molotov.
Dead, I fancy. Eh, Makiv? Queried the doctor in a tone of indifference.
The assistant, however, did not confirm the doctor's words.
Is he tall and with reddish hair? Asked the doctor.
Rostov described Denisov's appearance.
There was one like that, said the doctor as if pleased. That one is dead, I fancy. However, I'll look up our list. We had a list. Have you got it, Makiv?
Makar Alexeyevich has the list, answered the assistant. But if you'll step into the officer's ward, you'll see for yourself, he added, turning to Rostov.
You better not go, sir, said the doctor, or you may have to stay here yourself.
But Rostov bowed himself away from the doctor and asked the assistant to show him the way.
Only don't blame me, the doctor shouted up after him.
Rostov and the assistant into the corridor. Rostov held his nose and had to pause his strength before he could go on. Right. A door opened to the right, and an emaciated, sallow man on crutches, barefoot and in underclothing, limped out and, leaning against the doorpost, looked with glittering, envious eyes at those who were passing. Glancing in at the door, Rostov saw that the sick and wounded were lying on the floor, on straw and overcoats. How true.
May I go in and look?
What is there to see? Said the assistant.
But just because the assistant evidently did not want him to go in, Rostov entered the soldier's ward. The foul air, to which he had already begun to get used to in the corridor, was still stronger here. It was a little different, more pungent.
Oh, God, please.
And one felt that this was where it originated.
In the long room, brightly lit up by the sun through the large windows, the sick and wounded lay in 2 rows with their heads to the walls and leaving a passage in the middle. Most of them were unconscious and paid no attention to the newcomers. Those who were conscious raised themselves or lifted their thin, yellow faces and all looked intently at Rostov with the same expression of hope, of relief, reproach, and envy of another's health. Rostov went to the middle of the room and, looking through the open doors into the 2 adjoining rooms, saw the same thing there. He stood still, looking silently around. He had not at all expected such a sight. Just before him, almost across the middle of the passage, on the bare floor, lay a sick man, probably a Cossack to judge by the cut of his hair. The man lay on his back, his huge arms and legs outstretched. His face was purple, his eyes were rolled back so that only the whites were seen, and on his bare legs and arms, which were still red, the veins stood out like cords. He was knocking the back of his head against the floor, hoarsely uttering some word which he kept repeating. Rostov listened and made out the word. It was drink, drink, or drink. Rostov glanced around, looking for someone who would put this man back in his place and bring him water.
Who looks after the sick here? He asked the assistant.
Just then, a commissariat soldier, a hospital orderly, came in from the next room. marching stiffly, and drew up in front of Rostov.
"Good day, Your Honor," he shouted, rolling his eyes at Rostov and evidently mistaking him for one of the hospital authorities.
"Get him to his place and give him some water," said Rostov, pointing to the Cossack.
"Yes, Your Honor," the soldier replied complacently, and rolling his eyes more than ever, he drew himself up still straighter, but did not move.
No, it's impossible to do anything here, thought Rostov, lowering his eyes, and he was going out, but became aware of an intense look fixed on him on his right, and he turned. Close to the corner, on an overcoat, sat an old, unshaven, grey-bearded soldier, as thin as a skeleton, with a stern, sallow face and eyes intently fixed on Rostov. The man's neighbor on one side whispered something to him, pointing at Rostov, who noticed that the old man wanted to speak to him. He drew nearer, and saw that the old man had only one leg bent under him. The other had been amputated above the knee. His neighbor on the other side, who lay motionless some distance from him, with his head thrown back, was a young soldier with a snub nose. His pale, waxen face was still freckled, and his eyes were rolled back. Rostov looked at the young soldier, and a cold chill ran down his back.
"Well, this one seems," he began, turning to the assistant.
"And how we've been begging, Your Honor," said the old soldier, his jaw quivering. "He's been dead since morning. After all, we're men, not dogs."
"I'll send someone at once. He should be taken away at once," said the assistant hurriedly. "Let us go, Your Honor."
Yes, let us go," said Rostov hastily, and lowering his eyes and shrinking, he tried to pass unnoticed between the rows of reproachful, envious eyes that were fixed upon him, and went out of the room. Yikes. You know what's so weird? Have you ever smelled skunk close by? Like literally what they squirt.
Yeah.
It smells like gas.
Yeah, it does.
Isn't that so weird? It smells like gasoline, and it smells nothing like it does from a distance.
Oh.
I smelled it when dogs have been sprayed.
Yeah.
So like Stacey's dog, a couple of times I came in and had gotten sprayed by a skunk because we like happened on one, and it's a pain in the ass to wash it off and stuff. But it smells like when you're this close to it, it smells like straight up gasoline. Which I thought it would be like skunk, only more, or I don't know what I thought. But it didn't actually smell anything like skunk. But at any distance, skunk is skunk, like it smells distinctly.
Do you think that smells good? Is that what you pictured?
I don't know. I just noticed that the smell had changed in the thing, but you could still, but this is where it was emanating from, and I was like, I guess things like can smell different closer to the side. You good?
Yeah, this one. Chapter 18. Going along the corridor, the assistant led Rostov to the officers' wards, consisting of 3 rooms, the doors of which stood open. There were beds in these rooms, and the sick and wounded officers were lying or sitting on them. Some were walking about the rooms in hospital dressing gowns. The first person Rostov met in the officers' ward was a thin little man with one arm, who was walking about the first room in a nightcap and hospital dressing gown, with a pipe between his teeth. Rostov looked at him, trying to remember where he had seen him before.
"See where we've met again?" said the little man.
Tushin!
Wait, he's dying?
I think so.
I don't want to.
This is too relevant.
What?
That, like, the thing that is killing the soldiers is actually a disease. You know? That people are, you're most in danger in this hospital.
Tushin, don't you remember? Who gave you he has to remind him who he is? Who gave you a lift at Schöngraben? You know, your favorite fucking story? And I've had a bit cut off, you see, he went on with a smile, pointing to the empty sleeve of his dressing gown. Looking for Vasily Dmitrik Denisov, my neighbor, he added when he heard who Rostov wanted. Here, here. And Tushin led him into the next room, from whence came sounds of several laughing voices.
How can he laugh or even live at all here, thought Rostov, still aware of that smell of decomposing flesh that had been so strong in the soldier's ward, and still seeming to see fixed on him those envious looks which had followed him out from both sides, and the face of that young soldier with eyes rolled back.
Denisov lay asleep on his bed with his head under the blanket, though it was nearly noon.
Ah, Rostov, how are you? How are you? He called out, still in the same voice as in the regiment. But Rostov noticed sadly that under this habitual ease and animation some new, sinister, hidden feeling showed itself in the expression of Denisov's face and the intonations of his voice.
His wound, though a slight one, had not yet healed even now, 6 weeks after he had been hit. His face had the same swollen pallor as the faces of the other hospital patients, but it was not this that struck Rostov. What struck him was that Denisov did not seem glad to see him, and smiled at him unnaturally. He did not ask about the regiment, nor about the general state of affairs, and when Rostov spoke of these matters, did not listen.
Rostov even noticed that Denisov did not like to be reminded of the regiment, or in general of that other free life which was going on outside the hospital. He seemed to try to forget that old life, and was only interested in the affair with the commissariat officers. On Rostov's inquiry as to how the matter stood, he at once produced from under his pillow a paper he had received from the commission and the rough draft of his answer to it. He became animated when he began reading his paper, and specially drew Rostov's attention to the stinging rejoinders he made to his enemies. His hospital companions, who had gathered round Rostov, a fresh arrival from outside, as soon as Denisov began reading his answer. Rostov noted by their faces that all those gentlemen had already heard the story more than once and were tired of it. Only the man who had the next bed, a stout Ulan, continued to sit on his bed, gloomily frowning and smoking a pipe, and little one-armed Tushin still listened, shaking his head disapprovingly. In the middle of the reading, the Ulan interrupted Denisov.
Well, what I say is, he said, turning to Rostov, it would be best simply to petition the Emperor for pardon. They say great rewards will now be distributed, and surely a pardon would be granted.
Me petition in a voice to which he tried hard to give the old energy and fire, but which sounded like an expression of irritable impotence. What for? If I were a wobber, I would ask mercy, but I'm being court-martialed for bringing wobbles to a book. Let them try me. I'm not afraid of anyone. I've served the Tsar and my country honorably, and have not stolen. And am I to be degraded? Listen, I'm writing to them straight. This is what I say. If I had robbed the treasury...
It's certainly well written, said Tushin, but that's not the point, Vasily Dmitrik. And he also turned to Rostov. One has to submit, and Vasily Dmitrik doesn't want to. You know the auditor told you it was a bad business.
Well, let it be bad, said Denisov.
The auditor wrote out a petition for you, continued Tushin, and you ought to sign it, and ask this gentleman to take it. No doubt he, indicating Rostov, has connections on the staff. You won't find a better opportunity.
When I said I'm not going to grovel, Denisov interrupted him, went on reading his paper.
Rostov had not the courage to persuade Denisov, though he instinctively felt that the way advised by Tushin and the other officers was the safest, and though he would have been glad to be of service to Denisov. He knew his stubborn will and straightforward, hasty temper.
When the reading of Denisov's virulent reply, which took more than an hour, was over, Rostov said nothing, and he spent the rest of the day in a most dejected state of mind amid Denisov's hospital comrades, who had gathered round him, telling them what he knew and listening to their stories. Denisov was moodily silent all the evening.
Late in the evening, when Rostov was about to leave, he asked Denisov whether he had no commission for him.
Yes, wait a bit, said Denisov, glancing round at the officers, and taking his papers from under his pillow, he went to the window, where he had an ink pot, and sat down to write.
It seems it's no use knocking one's head against a wall, he said, coming from the window and giving Rostov a large envelope. In it was the petition to the emperor drawn up by the orator, in which Denisov, without alluding to the offences of the commissariat officials, simply asked for pardon.
And then, it seems.
He did not finish, but gave a painfully unnatural smile.
Chapter 19. Having returned to the regiment and told the commander the state of Denisov's affairs, Rostov rode to Tilsit with a letter to the emperor.
Oh! On the 13th of June, the French and Russian... He's like, you sure you don't have anything for me to do? Let's say a letter to a certain...
I'm really good at errands.
Alexander. On the 13th of June, the French and Russian emperors arrived in Tilsit. Boris Drubetskoy had asked the important personage on whom he was in attendance to include him in the suite appointed for the stay at Tilsit.
I should like to see the great man, he said, alluding to Napoleon, whom hitherto he, like everyone else, had always called Bonaparte.
Okay. On the 13th of June, the French and Russian emperors arrived?
Yeah. French. You're wondering about the French?
What did they do there?
This is why we probably get to know some history. But I believe, like, the French monarchy fell in the reform.
If he is the emperor.
Right.
So what are they meeting? What are they meeting?
Are they maybe they're meeting. But it says the French and Russian emperor. Yeah, just one of them. Got it. And that's what it would be. Yeah, maybe they're meeting. Okay.
You are speaking of Bonaparte, asked the general, smiling.
Boris looked at his general inquiringly and immediately saw that he was being tested.
Who's Boris?
Boris, yeah.
Oh.
The one who's like apparently sleeping with Helena now.
Oh.
Yeah.
I had a bit of a brain fart.
Where's Drubetskoy?
Sorry, where were we?
I'm speaking, Prince.
I am speaking, Prince of the Emperor Napoleon, he replied. The general patted him on the shoulder with a smile.
You will go far, he said. And took him to Tilsit.
Boris was on the day the two emperors met. He saw the rafts decorated with monograms, saw Napoleon pass before the French guards on the farther bank of the river, saw the pensive face of the Emperor Alexander as he sat in silence in a tavern. What? Maybe they mean a different kind of tavern. On the bank. He was getting shit-faced at a bar down the street. On the bank of the Niemen, awaiting Napoleon's arrival, saw both emperors get into boats and saw how Napoleon, reaching the raft first, stepped quickly forward to meet Alexander and held out his hand to him, and how they both retired into the pavilion. Since he had begun to move in the highest circles, Boris had made it. He's the one who's like a social climber, right?
Yeah, totally.
Boris had made it his habit to watch attentively all that went on around him and to note it down. At the time of the meeting at Tilsit, he asked the names of those who had come with Napoleon and about the uniforms they wore and listened attentively to words spoken by important personages. At the moment the emperors went into the pavilion, he looked at his watch and did not forget to look at it again when Alexander came out. So he's just like annoying. Cool. The interview had lasted an hour and 53 minutes. He noted this down that same evening, among other facts he felt to be of historic importance. As the emperor's suite was a very small one, it was a matter of great importance for a man who valued his success in the service to be at Tilsit on the occasion of this interview between the two emperors, and having succeeded in this, Boris felt that henceforth his position was fully assured. He had not only become known, but people had grown accustomed to him and accepted him. Twice he had executed commissions to the emperor himself so that the latter knew his face, and all those at court, far from cold-shouldering him, as at first when they considered him a newcomer, would now have been surprised had he been absent.
Boris lodged with another adjutant, Polish Count Zielinski. Zielinski, a Pole brought up in Paris, was rich and passionately fond of French, and almost every day of the stay at Tilsit, French officers of guard and from French headquarters were dining and lunching with him and Boris.
On the evening of the 24th of June, Count Zielinski arranged a supper for his French friends. The guest of honor was an aide-de-camp of Napoleon's. There were also several French officers of the guard and a page of Napoleon's, a young lad of an old aristocratic French family. That same day, Rostov, profiting by the darkness to avoid being recognized in civilian dress, came to Tilsit and went to the lodging occupied by Boris and Zielinski.
Rostov, in common with the whole army from which he came, was far from having experienced the change of feeling toward Napoleon and the French, who, from being foes, had suddenly become friends. That had taken place at headquarters and in Boris. In the army, Bonaparte and the French were still regarded with mingled feelings of anger, contempt, and fear. Only recently, talking with one of Pladov's Cossack officers, Rostov had argued that if Napoleon were taken prisoner, he would be treated not as a sovereign, but as a criminal. Quite lately, happening to meet a wounded French colonel on the road, Rostov had maintained with heat that peace was impossible between a legitimate sovereign.
I got a question.
Yeah.
If they're friends with Napoleon, why are we still here?
They're not friends. They're negotiating, potentially? Okay. That's what I'm guessing. I need to read this paragraph again, though, because I was not paying attention. Okay. Rostov, in common with the whole army from which he came, was far from having experienced the change of feeling toward Napoleon and the French, who from being foes had suddenly become friends, that had taken place at headquarters and in Boris. So I guess because they're meeting, now they're all fraternizing.
Mm-hmm.
It's weird.
Yeah, it is weird.
It's weird. Okay. In the army, Bonaparte and the French were still regarded with mingled feelings of anger, contempt, and fear. Only recently, talking with one of Pladov's Cossack officers, Rostov had argued that if Napoleon were taken prisoner, he would be treated not as a sovereign, but as a criminal. Quite lately, happening to meet a wounded French colonel on the road, Rostov had maintained with heat that peace was impossible between a legitimate sovereign and the criminal Bonaparte. Rostov was therefore unpleasantly struck by the presence of French officers in Boris's lodging, dressed in uniforms. He had been blank. As soon as he noticed a French officer who thrust his head out of the door, that warlike feeling of hostility which he always experienced at the sight of the enemy seized him. He stopped at the threshold and asked in Russian whether Drubetskoy lived there. Boris, hearing a strange voice in the anteroom, came out to meet him.
Quite strange, you mean familiar.
Right. An expression of annoyance showed itself for a moment on his face on first recognizing Rostov.
Ah, it's you. Very glad to see you, he said, however, coming toward him with a smile. But Rostov had noticed his first impulse.
I've come at a bad time, I think. I should not have come, but I have business, he said coldly.
Why do they hate each other?
I don't think they hate each other. I think Rostov's just weirded out by the fact that there's French. He thinks it's a betrayal.
No, I know Rostov's weirded out by that, but
yeah.
Why is Boris not happy to see? What's their background?
And he's like, oh, dude, I'm not brave.
I imagine that Rostov arrives and it's kind of like he's walking into a room where, there's an orgy going on and one of the people in there is his spouse. He's like, there's nowhere to look. That's what I think this is.
That's exactly what's going on.
Well, I'm saying it's
symbolically.
Yeah.
Metaphorically.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah. More on the wonder.
That's me?
I think so.
No, I only wonder how you managed to get away from your regiment. Dans un moment, je suis à vous, he said, answering someone who called him.
Even everybody with you.
See?
I see I'm intruding, Rostov repeated. No, it's like, yeah, that's totally what's going on.
Yeah, this
I'll be right back. I'll be right back.
No, yeah, I'll be right back. And he's like, the curtains are like over here. And he's like,
I see him intruding, Rostov repeated.
the look of annoyance had already disappeared from Boris's face, having evidently reflected and decided how to act. He very quietly took both Rostov's hands and led him into the next room. Both his hands? His eyes looking serenely and steadily at Rostov. How awkward is this? Seems to be veiled by something, as if screened by blue spectacles of conventionality. Yes, this is very conventional. So it seems to Rostov.
Oh, come now. As if you could come at a wrong time, said Boris. And he led him into the room where the supper table was laid and introduced him to his guests, explaining that he was not a civilian, but an hussar officer and an old friend of his.
Count Zelinsky, Lecomte, and then Le Capitaine SS, I don't understand what's happening, said he, naming his guests. Rostov looked frowningly at the Frenchman, bowed reluctantly, and remained silent.
Zelinsky evidently did not receive this new Russian person very willingly into his circle and did not speak to Rostov.
Because he only likes French people.
Boris did not appear to notice the constraint the newcomer produced, and with the same pleasant composure and the same veiled look in his eyes with which he had met Rostov, tried to enliven the conversation. One of the Frenchmen, with the politeness characteristic of his countrymen, addressed the obstinately taciturn Rostov, saying that the latter had probably come to Tilsit to see the Emperor.
No, I came on business with my Rostov briefly.
Rostov had been out of humor from the moment he noticed the look of dissatisfaction on Boris's face. And as always happens to those in a bad humor, it seemed to him that everyone regarded him with aversion, and that he was in everybody's way. He really was in their way, for he alone took no part in the conversation, which again became general. The looks the visitors cast on him seemed to say, and what is he sitting here for? He rose and went up to Boris.
Anyhow, I'm in your way, he said in a low tone. Come, and talk over my business and I'll blow away.
No, not at all, said Boris.
Oh, stop, Boris.
Oh my God. But if you are tired, come and lie down in my room and have a rest.
Yes, really.
They went into the little room where Boris slept. Rostov, without sitting down, began at once irritably Boris Denisov's affair, asking him whether, through his general, he could and would intercede with the Emperor on Denisov's behalf and get Denisov's petition handed in. When he and Boris were alone, Rostov felt for the first time that he could not look Boris in the face without a sense of awkwardness. Boris, with one leg crossed over the other and stroking his left hand with the slender fingers of his right.
Gross.
Ew, he's like,
Gross.
ooh. Listen to Rostov as a general listens to the report of a subordinate, now looking aside and now gazing straight into Rostov's eyes with the same veiled look. Each time this happened, Rostov felt uncomfortable and cast down his eyes.
This is so weird. I have heard of such cases and know that His Majesty is very severe in such affairs. I think it would be best not to bring it before the Emperor, but to apply to the commander of the corps. But in general, I think...
So you don't want to do anything? Well then, say so, Rostov almost shouted, not looking Boris in the face.
Or smile.
On the contrary, I will do what I can. Only I thought...
At that moment, Zelensky's voice was heard calling Boris.
Well then go, 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 said Rostov, and refusing supper and remaining alone in the little room, he walked up and down for a long time, hearing the light-hearted French conversation from the next room.
So he stays there? That's awkward. It's like one of the...
That sounds exactly how I always am at a party.
You know what? Just forget it. I'm going to bed.
Pretty much.
And everyone's in the living room.
Yeah, that's right.
Passive aggressively.
Why doesn't anyone want to hang out with me?
I feel like they are averse to my being here. Chapter 20. Mm-hmm. I forget how you say 20 in French. I just had a brain thought.
Yeah.
Yeah.
By the way, I realized, I think this was like almost before I fell asleep last night. I was like, corps, which is body in French. But that's why you don't pronounce it.
Oops.
Yeah. I was like, that's interesting. How did you get that from the French?
Why not?
No, just how did that come about? Weird.
Why
The
don't
origins
you
of
go
it.
to etymology.com?
Etymology.com is my home page.
Why don't you go to entomology.com? I bet that's what's his name?
What it is?
Entomology.com. Chapter 20. Rostov had come to Tilsit the day least suitable for a petition on Denisov's behalf. He could not himself go to the general in attendance as he was in mufti. What?
You're mufti.
Oh, I was going to say, like, that comes from my part of the world. And had come to Tilsit without permission to do so. And Boris, even had he wished to, I was just wondering how he was on leave to, like, traipse about the countryside delivering letters and stuff. I was like, isn't he expected anywhere?
Yeah.
He was like, I love the regimental life. It's so regimented. I have to, like, be doing exactly what I'm told. And
Also,
like,
I
no
heard
problem.
really.
I'll go to the hospital. No problem.
What do you think about the fact that he's like, I'm going to pay back my dad with the allowance that my dad gives me?
Wait, that's his allowance?
Yeah. He was like, I have to pay my father back, and
I thought that's what he was
an allowance.
making from the.
He gets an allowance of 10,000 rubles.
I
So
remember
he's-
that.
So he's like only spending 2,000 of that.
I thought he was getting paid by the army.
I think it said his allowance.
That'd be great. That's really funny.
I don't, unless he gets an allowance from the army.
I mean, don't they kind of have to?
I think they have to pay their soldiers. I think they have to pay their soldiers. Is an allowance? I'm not sure now where the. Anyway, I thought it was like I'm
That's
gonna
funny.
pay my dad back with my dad's money. That's like when I used to buy Christmas presents for my parents, and I would be like, "Give me money," and then I'd go to the mall.
To do so. And Boris, even had he wished to, could not have done so on the following day. On that day, June 27th, the preliminaries of peace were signed. Wait, are we getting to the peace half of the book when we're only 34%
Definitely.
the way in?
This war goes till 1812. So definitely,
So we are not the preliminaries of peace.
it's true.
The emperors exchanged decorations. Alexander received the Cross of the Legion of Honor and Napoleon the Order of St. Andrew of the First Degree, and a dinner had been arranged for the evening, given by a battalion of the French Guards to the Preobrazhensk battalion. The emperors were to be present at the banquet.
Well done.
What? Banquet?
Whenever there's no Preobrazhensk, whenever there's a word, I'm like, oh, thank God she has that one.
I mean, I just assume that we're getting all of them.
I assume we're getting all of them spot on.
You do? I literally assume every single one is wrong. Seems like the best assumption if you're going to make some assumption.
Is that you're wrong? Yes.
With this?
With
like,
this,
I have
okay.
no basis to know what.
Yeah.
There's no
I
reason
just
to.
assume we'll be forgiven.
I mean,
by-
that's the hope. I don't know if future Nithya is going to forgive us, but I'm going to be like, the least you can do. Or maybe the Russians will have, like, long been our overlords. And I'll look back and be like, remember when we, like, didn't know how to say things in Russian? Well, we better be really respectful from now on towards all the Russians in this book.
our army.
It is our army. I think this is a good pivot. I feel good about this. So at least, like, we'll get on the right side of history at some point in this live stream.
Russia.
We're only 24% in.
Didn't mothers.
Yeah, it didn't take us that long. Okay.
Rostov felt so ill at ease and uncomfortable with Boris that when the latter looked in after supper, he pretended to be asleep. Oh, that's good. That's a good boy. I like that one too.
Why are they in a relationship?
I don't know. An early next morning went away, avoiding Boris. In his civilian clothes and a round hat, he wandered about the town, staring at the French in their uniforms and staring at them.
They deserve to be stared at. The French suck. Only Russians are good.
Right. And at the streets and houses where the Russian and French emperors were staying. In a square, he saw tables being set up and preparations made for the dinner. He saw the Russian and French colors draped from side to side of the streets, and with huge monograms A and N.
Oh,
that's really sweet.
Sitting in a tree.
I shipped them. Like, what would the shipping be? Like, Napolander. In the windows of the houses, also flags and bunting were displayed.
Alexian.
Yeah.
Boris doesn't want to help me, and I don't want to ask. That's settled, thought Nicholas. All is over between us, but I won't leave. It's over between us. But I won't leave here without having done all I can for Denisov, and certainly not without getting his letter to the Emperor. You just realized?
You just got it.
He's been so distracted this whole time. He's like, the Emperor! Like 6 days into this. It's like he just heard himself say it.
Isn't that why he's there?
Yeah.
To deliver something to the Emperor?
Uh-huh.
He's like, oh, it's...
Oh, that Emperor! He's like, A and N. Alexander and Nicholas! Unconsciously returned to the house where Alexander lodged. Unconsciously. He's like, oh, shit. How does he even know? Go ahead.
Saddled horses were standing before the house, and the suite were assembling, evidently preparing for the Emperor to come out.
I may see him at any moment, thought Rostov. If only I were to hand the letter direct to him and tell him all. Could they really arrest me for my civilian clothes? Surely not. He would understand on whose side justice lies. He understands everything, knows everything. Who can be more just, more magnanimous than he? And even if they did arrest me for being killed, what would it matter? Thought he, looking at an officer who was entering the house the Emperor occupied. After all, they do go in. It's all nonsense. I'll go in and hand the letter to the Emperor myself. So much the worse for Drubetskoy, who drives me to it. And suddenly, with a determination he himself did not expect, Rostov felt for the letter in his pocket and went straight to the house.
No, I won't miss my opportunity now, as I did after Austerlitz. He thought, expecting every moment to meet the monarch, and conscious of the blood that rushed to his heart at the thought. I will fall at his feet and beseech him. He will lift me up, will listen, and will even thank me. I am happy when I can do good, but to remedy injustice is the greatest happiness, Rostov fancied the sovereign saying, and passing people who looked after him with curiosity, he entered the porch of the Emperor's house.
He's gonna get, stabbed any second.
He could be an assassin. He could be anyone.
That's what I'm saying. I would just, A broad staircase led straight up from the entry, and to the right he saw a closed door. Below...
Okay, I just want to see where this goes. Okay.
Below, under the staircase, was a door. Which lesson? Which one?
Feeling himself.
Mm-hmm. Below, under the staircase, was a door leading to the lower floor.
Whom do you want? Someone inquired.
To hand a letter. To hand a letter? A petition to His Majesty? Said Nicholas with a tremor in his voice.
A petition? This way, to the officer on duty.
Who's talking?
He pushed on the door leading.
I guess
a voice.
I guess there's a person there. They neglected to mention it.
Only it won't be accepted.
On hearing this indifferent voice, what do you mean he was shown a door? By whom? There's no one there. Okay, on hearing this indifferent voice, Rostov grew frightened at what he was doing. Yeah, because that's frightening. The fact that there's no one there and someone's talking. The thought of meeting the Emperor at any moment was so fascinating and consequently so alarming that he was ready to run away again, just as he did at Austerlitz. But the official who had questioned him opened the door.
Oh, there's a body.
And Rostov entered.
A short, stout man of about 30, in white breeches and high boots, and a Baptiste shirt that he had evidently only just put on, standing in that room, and his valet was buttoning on the back of his breeches a new pair of handsome silk embroidered braces. Is he in the wrong room? Okay. That, for some reason, attracted Rostov's attention. This man was speaking to someone in the adjoining room.
A good figure, and in her first bloom, he was saying, but on seeing Rostov, he stopped short and frowned.
What is it? A petition?
What is it? Asked the other person in the other room.
Another petitioner, answered the man with the braces.
Tell him to come later. He'll be coming out directly. We must go.
Later. Tomorrow. It's too late.
Rostov turned and was about to go, but the man in the braces stopped him.
Whom have you come from? Who are you?
I come from Major Denisov, answered Rostov.
Are you an officer?
Lieutenant Count Rostov.
What audacity. Hand it in through your commander. And go along with you. Go. And he continued to put on the uniform the valet handed him.
Rostov went back into the hall and noticed that in the porch there were many officers and generals in full parade uniform whom he had to pass.
Cursing his temerity, his heart sinking at the thought of finding himself at any moment face to face with the Emperor and being put to shame and arrested in his presence, fully alive now at the impropriety of his conduct and repenting of it, Rostov, with downcast eyes, was making his way out of the house through the brilliant suites when a familiar voice called him and a hand detained him.
What are you doing here, sir? Civilian dress?
It was a cavalry general who had obtained the Emperor's special favor during this campaign and who had formerly commanded the division in which Rostov was serving.
Rostov, in dismay, began justifying himself, but seeing the kindly, jocular face of the general, he took him aside and in an excited voice, he drew his hand downward. In an excited voice, told him the whole affair, asking him to intercede for Denisov, whom the general knew. Having heard Rostov to the end, the general shook his head gravely.
Sorry for that, fine fellow. Give me the letter.
Hardly had Rostov handed him the letter and finished explaining Denisov's case, when hasty steps and the jingling of spurs were heard on the stairs, and the general, leaving him, went to the porch. The gentlemen of the Emperor's suite ran down the stairs and went to their horses. Hain, the same groom who had been at Austerlitz, led up the Emperor's horse, and the faint creak of a footstep Rostov knew at once. How does he know? Knew at once was heard on the stairs. Forgetting the danger of being recognized, Rostov went close to the porch, together with some inquisitive civilians. Well, that's all the better to camouflage yourself with, my dear. And again, after 2 years, saw the sweeters he adored, that same face, and same look, and step, and the same majesty and mildness, and the feeling of enthusiasm and love for his sovereign rose again in Rostov's soul in all its old force. In the uniform of the Preobrazhensky regiment, with white chamois, leather breeches, and high boots, and wearing a star Rostov did not know it was that of the Legion d'Honneur, the monarch came out into the porch, putting on his gloves and carrying his hat under his arm. He stopped and looked about him, brightening everywhere around by his glance. He spoke a few words to some of the generals, and recognizing the former commander of Rostov's division, smiled and beckoned to him.
All the suite drew back, and Rostov saw the general talking for some time to the emperor.
The emperor said a few words to him and took a step towards his horse. Again, the crowd of members of the suite and street gazers, among whom was Rostov, moved nearer to the emperor. Stopping beside his horse with his hand on the saddle, the emperor turned to the cavalry general and said in a loud voice, evidently wishing to be heard by all,
"Cannot do it, general. I cannot, because the law is stronger than I." And he raised his foot to the stirrup.
The general bowed his head respectfully, and the monarch mounted and rode down the street at a gallop. Beside himself with enthusiasm, Rostov ran after him with the Rostov ran after him with the crowd.
Yeah, he did. Oh, that Rostov.
He's just regressed into like a 6-year-old boy.
It's pretty much that. It's the Beatles.
Yeah.
I'm amazed he hasn't fainted in his presence. Chapter 21. The emperor rode to the square where, facing one another, a battalion of the Preobrazhensk regiment stood on the right, and a battalion of the French guards in their bearskin caps on the left.
As the Tsar rode up to one flank of the battalions, which presented arms, another group of horsemen galloped up to the opposite flank, and at the head of them, Rostov recognized Napoleon. It could be no one else. He came at a gallop, wearing a small hat, blue uniform open over a white vest, and the St. Andrew ribbon over his shoulder. He was riding a very fine, thoroughbred grey Arab horse with a crimson gold embroidered saddlecloth. On approaching Alexander, he raised his hat, and as he did so, Rostov, with his cavalryman's eye, could not help noticing that Napoleon did not sit well or firmly in the saddle. The battalion shouted, "Hurrah!" and "Vive l'Empereur!" Napoleon said something to Alexander, and both emperors dismounted and took each other's hands. Napoleon's face wore an unpleasant and artificial smile. Alexander was saying something affable to him.
In spite of the trampling of the French gendarmes' horses, which were pushing back the crowd, Rostov kept his eyes on every movement of Alexander and Bonaparte. It struck him as a surprise that Alexander treated Bonaparte as an equal, and that the latter was quite at ease with the Tsar, as if such relations with an emperor were an everyday matter to him.
Alexander and Napoleon, with the long train of their suites, approached the right flank of Preobrazhensk battalion and came straight up to the crowd standing there. The crowd unexpectedly found itself so close to the emperors that Rostov, standing in the front row, was afraid he might be recognized.
"Sire, I ask your permission to present." "Sire, I ask your permission to present the Legion of Honor to the bravest of your soldiers," said a sharp, precise voice, articulating every letter.
I was saying sire because we were wondering that. Yay! This was said by the undersized Napoleon. Looking up straight into Alexander's eyes, Alexander listened attentively to what was said to him, and bending his head, smiled pleasantly.
"To him who has borne himself most bravely in this last war," added Napoleon, accentuating at each syllable, as with a composure and assurance exasperating to Rostov. He ran his eyes over the Russian ranks drawn up before him, who all presented arms with their eyes fixed on their emperor.
"Will your majesty allow me to consult the colonel?" said Alexander, and took a few hasty steps towards Prince Kozlovsky, the commander of the battalion.
Bonaparte, meanwhile, began taking the glove off his small white hand, tore it in doing so, and threw it away. Tore it, okay. An aide-de-camp,
like those pants that you just rip off. He's like,
yeah.
Yes.
An aide-de-camp behind him rushed forward and picked it up.
"To whom shall it be given?" to the Emperor Alexander asked Kozlovsky in Russian in a low voice.
"To whomever your majesty commands."
The emperor knit his brows with dissatisfaction and, glancing back, remarked,
"But we must give him an answer."
Kozlovsky scanned the ranks resolutely and included Rostov in his scrutiny.
"What, Rostov?"
"Nobody knows you're a fucking..." He's gone back to his, Lazarev, the colonel called with a frown. Lazarev, the first soldier in the rank, stepped briskly forward.
Where are you off to? Stop here, voices whispered to Lazarev, who did not know where to go. Lazarev stopped, casting a sidelong look at his colonel in alarm. His face twitched, as often happens to soldiers called before the ranks.
Napoleon slightly turned his head and put his plump little hand. Disgusting! Plump little hand out behind him as if to take something? The members of his suite, guessing at once what he wanted, moved about and whispered as they passed something from one to the other, and a page, the same one Rostov had seen the previous evening at Boris's, ran forward and, bowing respectfully over the outstretched hand and not keeping it waiting a moment, laid in it an order on a red ribbon. Napoleon, without looking, pressed two fingers together and the badge was between them. Then he approached Lazarev, who rolled his eyes and persistently gazed at his own monarch, looked around at the Emperor Alexander to imply that what he was now doing was done for the sake of his ally, and the small white hand holding the order touched one of Lazarev's buttons. It was as if Napoleon knew that it was only necessary for his hand to deign to touch that soldier's breast for the soldier to be forever happy, rewarded, and distinguished from everyone else in the world. Napoleon merely laid the cross on Lazarev's breast and, dropping his hand, turned toward Alexander as though sure that the cross would adhere there. And it would.
Officious hands, Russian and French, immediately seized the cross and fastened it to the uniform. Lazarev glanced morosely at the little man with white hands who was doing something to him, and still standing motionless, presenting arms, looked again straight into Alexander's eyes, as if asking whether he should stand there or go away, or do something else. But receiving no orders, he remained for some time in that rigid position.
The emperors remounted and rode away. The Preobrazhensk battalion, breaking rank, mingled with the French guards, and sat down at the tables prepared for them.
Lazarev sat in the place of honor. Russian and French officers embraced him, congratulated him, and pressed his hands. Crowds of officers and civilians drew near merely to see him. A rumble of Russian and French voices and laughter filled the air around the tables in the square. Two officers with flushed faces, looking cheerful and happy, passed by Rostov.
What do you think of the treat? All on a silver plate, one of them was saying. Have you seen Lazarev?
I don't know.
Tomorrow, I hear, the Preobrazhenskys will give them a dinner.
Yes, but what luck for Lazarev. 1,200 francs pension for life.
Here's a cap, lads, shouted the Preobrazhensk soldier, donning a shaggy French cap.
It's a fine thing, first rate.
Have you heard the password? Asked one guards officer of another. The day before yesterday, it was Napoleon, France. Yesterday, Russie Grande. One day our emperor gives it, and the next day Napoleon. Tomorrow our emperor will send St. George's Cross to the bravest of the French guards. It has to be done. He must respond in kind.
Boris, too, with his friend Zelensky, came to see the Preobrazhensk banquet. On his way back, he noticed Rostov standing by the corner of a house.
Wouldn't it be great if we were saying banquet this whole time? Rostov, how do you do? We missed one another, he said, and could not refrain from asking what was the matter. So strangely dismal and troubled was Rostov's face.
Nothing, replied Rostov.
You call around?
Yes, I will.
Rostov stood at that corner for a long time, watching the feast from a distance. In his mind, a painful process was going on in which he could not bring to a conclusion. Terrible doubts rose in his soul. Now he remembered Denisov with his changed expression, his submission, and the whole hospital, with arms and legs torn off, and its dirt and disease. So vividly did he recall that hospital stench of dead flesh that he looked around to see where the smell came from. Next, he thought of that self-satisfied Bonaparte with his small white hand, who was now an emperor, liked and respected by Alexander. Then, why those severed arms and legs, and those dead men? Then again, he thought of Lazarev, rewarded, and Denisov, punished and unpardoned. He caught himself harboring such strange thoughts that he was frightened.
The smell of the food the Preobrazhenskys were eating and a sense of hunger recalled him from these reflections. He had to get something to eat before going away. He went to a hotel he had noticed that morning. There he found so many people, among them officers who, like himself, had come in civilian clothes, that he had difficulty in getting a dinner. 2 officers of his own division joined him. The conversation naturally turned on the peace. The officers, his comrades, like most of the army, were dissatisfied with the peace concluded after the Battle of Friedland. They said that had we held out a little longer, Napoleon would have been done for, as his troops had neither provisions nor ammunition. Nicholas ate and drank, chiefly the latter, in silence. He finished a couple of bottles of wine by himself. The process in his mind went on tormenting him without reaching a conclusion. He feared to give way to his thoughts, yet could not get rid of them. Suddenly, on one of the officers saying that it was humiliating to look at the French, Rostov began shouting with uncalled-for wrath, and therefore much to the surprise of the officers.
"How can you judge what's best?" he cried, the blood suddenly rushing to his face. "How can you judge the Emperor's actions? What right have we to argue? We cannot comprehend either the Emperor's aims or his actions."
"But I never said a word about the Emperor," said the officer, justifying himself and unable to understand Rostov's outburst, except on the supposition that he was drunk.
But Rostov did not listen to him.
"We are not diplomatic officials. We are soldiers and nothing more," he went on. "If we are ordered to die, we must die. If we're punished, it means that we have deserved it. It's not for us to judge. If the Emperor pleases to recognize Bonaparte as Emperor and to conclude an alliance with him, it means that that is the right thing to do.
Vanilla or chocolate?
If once we begin judging and arguing about everything, nothing sacred will be left. That way we shall be saying there is no God, nothing," shouted Nicholas, banging on the table, very little to the point as it seemed to his listeners, but quite relevantly to the course of his own thoughts.
"Our business is to do our duty, to fight and not to think. That's all," said he.
"And to drink," said one of the officers, not wishing to quarrel.
"Yes, and to drink," assented Nicholas. "Hello there, another bottle," he shouted.
In 1808, the Emperor Alexander went to Erfurt for a fresh interview with the Emperor Napoleon, and in the upper circles of Petersburg, there was much talk of the grandeur of this important meeting.
Chapter 1.
Shorty.
In 1809, the intimacy between the world's 2 arbiters, as Napoleon and Alexander were called, was such that when Napoleon declared war on Austria, a Russian corps crossed the frontier to cooperate with our old enemy Bonaparte against our old ally, the Emperor of Austria. And in court circles, the possibility of marriage between Napoleon and one of Alexander's sisters was spoken of. But besides considering society directed on the internal changes that were being undertaken in all the departments of government.
Life, meanwhile, real life, with its essential interests of health and sickness, toil and rest, and its intellectual interests in thought, science, poetry, music, love, friendship, hatred, and passions, went on as usual, independently of and apart from political friendship or enmity with Napoleon Bonaparte and from all the schemes of reconstruction.
That was an absurdly short chapter.
Just like,
It's not a page.
That is the end of Book 5. Goodbye. Book 5.
Goodbye, Book 5.
What?
We're already at
Absurdity.
1808.
Yeah.
Amazing. Just amazing. It's just wonderful.
What is from God?
What a what?
What is art?
Da.
No.
Da.
Dart.
Dart.
Yeah.
The art. The art.
Anything you want to say? Sum it up? Any impressions? Thoughts? Reflections?
No, I just interject them whenever I bloody well feel like. I haven't been holding anything back. Why are we doing the same thing with our left foot?
I don't know. That's so weird.
And my right leg, which you can't see, is also folded under
This is the weirdest thing
like
ever.
this.
Okay. I don't know how that happened.
Nor
Who
I.
did it first?
Chicken. Egg. Chicken.
Now I can't move out of this position.
Never. I don't know how this happened. I was very focused on putting my toes on my phone because I was thinking like, I wonder if my toe prints are as unique as my this.
Pardon?
I don't know. But I was just thinking about toe prints as I placed my foot on this. That's all I was thinking of, but I could still have seen you sitting like that and subconsciously. Got it. Oh! Nothing.
Yeah. I'm underwhelmed right now. That is good.
You're underwhelmed?
I got underwhelmed.
By the potential of peace?
Yeah.
Because you're so warlike.
That's just, I want more war.
I feel like you do.
I do. It's like, as terrible as that stuff was in the Housewives. Yeah. This is what it looks like.
When it burns, that means it's working.
Yeah.
Poor fucking Denisov. He's like one of the only people I like in the whole book. I mean, that's a little. No, it's not unfair to say.
It's kind of accurate.
I really hope he doesn't just. I can see his death just being so casually thrown in there by fucking Tolstoy. I can see him being like,
we don't even.
Oh, and by the way, like since he was found guilty in what's it called, but it didn't really matter because he was good. Typhus.
Typhus, excuse me.
Excuse me. Yeah, I don't know. That's sad.
I almost thought that Rostov was gonna. I'm waiting for him to see Alexander as a human being and be like, wait a second. What the hell's going on here?
What do you mean, what the hell's going on here?
I thought that was leaning towards. Right, why is the Emperor like bound down to Napoleon? What the hell is going on there? All this charade.
I think that's what that drunken outburst is about.
But if anything, the drunken outburst was like,
yeah,
we just have to follow their orders.
Right, because of the doubt.
But going back to like.
Yeah, but you only retreat back to a position like that when you're like, oh shit, what's happening?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I keep thinking that like the characters are gonna.
I mean, they're not gonna end up being like Marlon Brando. Yeah. C'est tout.
C'est tout. Goodbye.
Oh, goodbye.